It is spring 2020, and the birds are chirping, the flowers are blooming, and if you're like me, you own dividend stocks through dividend reinvestment plans, proxies and annual reports are filling your mailbox right about now. Hi, I'm John McNeil, and this is the Invest Strong Network. Welcome. So, when you receive those annual reports and proxies, what should you look for, and how can you best navigate the world of corporate speak? That's what this video will be about. So, for many, many years, I have owned stocks directly through dividend reinvestment plans. And when you own stock like that, the transfer agent will send you a physical annual report and proxy form to vote on various corporate functions. Now, actually these days, and especially in this year, because of certain circumstances that are clear, they will not be having so many annual meetings and things of that nature. So there will not be people coming together, as it were, in a big conference to sort these things out. Instead, they are sending me a lot of information that would allow me to vote on these various measures online, right? And that saves them postage costs of having to produce and distribute this stuff. And I understand that. But there are some that still send physical annual reports and proxies. So when you receive your annual report, these are things that I look out for, and I think it might be wise for you to do the same. First of all, there is, and by the way, I have a cross section of annual reports here, and I'll use various annual reports to do this. The first thing you want to look for is the chairperson's letter. Now, the chairperson or CEO, they will give their thoughts on the year past and also the year to come. Now, to me, less important than what they say is the kind of overall tone that they project. There are certain keywords that I look for and that you should look for if you're reading a chairperson or CEO letter. If you see the word unfortunate more than once in any letter, look out. That is bad news. That's what I've come to discover over the years, right? Look for that word unfortunate or unfortunately or any derivative of that. If that is used repeatedly in a letter, that's just not what you want to hear or see, right? Okay, and regardless of the context, right? Okay, now moving on, most of these physical annual reports, and this one is from Teleflex, right? Many of them are filled with very dense technical accounting terms and whatnot. But for me, I like to go straight to the nitty gritty, right? What are some of the nitty gritty? Well, after the chairperson's letter, to me, the next most important aspect is usually the item 3, which is legal proceedings. Now, usually a company will say, such and such company from time to time is involved in various legal proceedings that are handled and defended in the ordinary course of business, or something like that. Basically what they're saying is, hey, we have to have lawyers on hand because, legal things pop up and we have to handle it. Now, here's the key. If their item 3 statement goes beyond that, and in fact, they begin to list a long variety of legal proceedings that they are involved with, that is bad bad news, right? Because at that point, what they are saying is that these legal proceedings that they are involved with will have a material effect on the company's operations, right? And this could be regulatory suits. They could be criminal suits. In fact, I've seen a lot of those, right? In some of the utilities that I own, there are CLERCLA, that's CECLA reports. Now, CLERCLA, better known as Superfund, the Superfund, this is a massive environmental fund that they will have to pay into to clean up some mess that either their company or the predecessor has contributed, to creating over the course of the past few years, right? And often those CLERCLA liabilities are very, very heavy. So if you see that in the item 3, look out, right? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the company is doomed, certainly not. But what it does mean is that there's kind of an albatross around the neck of this thing, and until the CLERCLA costs are completely paid off, they're just going to have to spend more money, and their profitability is going to be impacted by that. Now, there was also the case of one bank based out of Puerto Rico that I owned shares in back in the early 2000s. Now, in one of the annual reports, the CEO went to great lengths to defend the company and saying how they operate on only the highest standards of accountability and ethics, and that their primary goal is to service the community, and that's their guiding ethos, right? Okay, sound great. Then I go to their item 3 page, and we find out that the federal government forced them to pay a $21 million fine for allowing their bank to be used by Mexican drug cartels for money laundering purposes. Right? Yes, read your item 3. You can't believe don't take everything the CEO says at face value. Read the item 3. All right. Now, often in the annual report, the company will publish a comparative chart. Now, that chart will usually compare the return of the company at hand to a benchmark, right? A benchmark index. And sometimes they'll actually compare to the S&P 500, right? Which is a broader index. And sometimes they'll even compare to their competitors. And quite often, they'll actually have one grand chart that has all of those comparisons on there. Now, this particular one I'm choosing is WSFS Financial Corporation. It's a bank out of Delaware. And here's an example of their chart. It's good to review the comparison chart, right? It'll give you an idea of how this company compares to the benchmark and compared to its peers. And that's very instructive to get an idea of the overall return of this thing. Because if you don't compare the return to the proper index or to the peers, well, you may get a wildly over-exaggerated idea of its return, or it may actually understate the performance because the entire industry may have been damaged. And, you look at just this performance and against a grand benchmark, and it doesn't look comparable. But in fact, they perform very well compared to their immediate peers, right? So, you want to keep that in mind. Also, I would suggest looking at their acquisitions and dispositions. In the course of business, virtually every company is publicly traded company, that is, they're acquiring competitors or facilities, or they are divesting of certain units and things like that. All of those divestitures and acquisitions, they have a material effect on the company at hand. In fact, there have been recently situations where a company, the company that you purchased, Raytheon, for example, is actually not the company you thought you bought. Well, why? Because the contemporary company is actually the result of a merger of two larger entities, and that entity had actually shed or divested themselves of certain primary operating units, right? But they kept the predecessor name that those previous units operated under. So you may think you are acquiring shares in a company that made elevators or HVAC units and things like that, when in fact it's something completely different because they have divested of those units, right? Something to look out for, and because you want to have an idea, a real idea of what this company does and how it makes its money, right? Okay, so now in the follow-up video to this one, what I'll do is I'll go into the proxies, right? And how things I look for when I'm voting for certain items and propositions that come up in the corporate world, right? Very instructive. I think you'll find it. All right. So if you appreciated this vid, please smash the like button, please. And subscribe! Subscribe! How many times do I have to tell your hard head to subscribe? My dad. What can I say? All right. So thank you and good luck.